Tonight, we are so excited about this guest. He's the founder of Pacifica Graduate Institute, Dream Tending, and the Academy of Imagination. For more than 35 years, he explored the power of dreams through depth psychology. He has collaborated with Joseph Campbell, Marion Woodman, Robert Johnson, James Hillman, and Native elders worldwide. He conducts dream work and imagination seminars throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia. For more information about our guest, visit dreamtending.com. To talk about his book, as I mentioned, The Imagination Matrix, please welcome Dr. Stephen Aizenstat.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you to this extraordinary bookstore, which is one of my favorites. I've been in town for, 45 years, 50 years, and I've been in this bookstore again and again. It's fantastic. It's nostalgic and really of soul. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to share a little bit about the Imagination Matrix, what brought me into writing the book. I'll read a couple passages and then invite you to ask questions. I, once upon a lifetime, taught both junior high school, middle school, and high school, and then at Pacific, of course, and I love questions and answers. So, as I'm talking, be imagining into what kinds of questions so we can be in a dialogue, which would be really wonderful. Right, so this book, Imagination Matrix, I think is more than anything else the next evolution of the work that I developed in dream tending, working with dreams. So dreams are a natural access place to imagination, particularly the autonomous, the deeper imagination. The question then becomes, what happens when you journey in that field, in those realms of experience? Yeah? And what happens in part is you discover things. I certainly did. I discovered all kinds of things. And then what occurs is something more, because there's a kind of different quality of consciousness, of experience that kind of comes forward and informs a life. And that's what I'm calling imaginal consciousness and living an imagination-centered life. An imagination-centered life. Different than what it is to be in the world of the rational mind only, or with a particular kind of focus. In this context, in this way of experiencing life, something else opens. Wonder opens, for sure. Creativity opens, indeed. Curiosity comes forward, fantastic. And when curiosity comes forward, when curiosity opens, one thing that we've discovered, now meta-research studies are verifying, we are curious. Once curiosity comes, imagination opens more widely. When that happens, being anxious and or depressed really begins to wane. It begins to really move out. So you can't really be fully curious, not authentically curious, and anxious and or depressed at the same time. They don't exist together. So really cool, particularly in the world of today where anxiety is and isolation is and because of what's going on with technology, there's a lot of screen time and a lot of separation from the beginning, and that creates different kinds of concerns and problems in mental health and in emotional well-being. Imagination, a way of being present in the world that's different. So let's experiment with that. Just real quickly, we'll do a quick little thing to open curiosity and imagination. Very simple. I'm going to invite you to take fingers like this. Yes, take 2 fingers and just bring your vision this way. Yeah. And scan. Just scan the area. Focused eyes. So pick up something in this focused place and just bring your attention, awareness to that place and sustain that for a moment. Sustain your gaze in that very focused environment. There you go. Now let's experiment with something. Let's open the fingers, move into peripheral vision, open vision. Look what happens when peripheral vision comes. And now, again, just take the time to look about. Look at how widely, yes, noticing different things all together. Easy warm-up exercise. Okay. easy warm-up because it opens peripheral, it opens imagination, it evokes, invites curiosity into our life from the beginning. Doing that 10 minutes a day changes the day, honestly. It opens imagination very effectively and really supports the journey in imagination. Now, people ask me constantly, how did this book come about? As I said, in part, it is the next evolution of my work with dreams, which I've been doing for many, many decades now. Also, I think since I was a kid, a little boy, the imagination and my curiosity was awakened. So I'll share a story with you that really announces that idea, right? And this story, I don't know, how many of you have been in Los Angeles, to the beaches there, to the ocean? Yeah, we're in Santa Barbara, we know the ocean. Many of us have been in Los Angeles. So as a 12-year-old, I was living in the San Fernando Valley. We know that place, right? And the idea to get to the ocean was over Topanga. Remember that Topanga Pass? Over the pass to the other side, where we then would visit the ocean. Back then, about a 50 to 75-minute drive. All right, I go 12 years old, and my parents take me there. And it's a very safe beach. It is created for people like us from suburbia, right? Very safe, very neighborhood-esque, so to speak, wider neighborhood. And there's lifeguard stands all up and down the beach, right? There are big signs that say food, so food is sold. Big parking lots. Everything is safe, secure, easy, cool. Now the beach is this long, and you see many other families, many kids, a lot of activity, a lot of commotion. And the thing about this beach, as those of you that have been to Zuma Beach, is that there is a jetty, right? A little breakwater that extends out. And what happens is that when the tide is in, it is a natural separation from this beach to the other side, the south side. And of course, parents forever will say, hey, don't go over there, right? That's not safe. Particularly if you're 12 years old, you stay here where it's supervised, right? It is all conscious, it's all laid out, everybody is present there. You don't go to that other side, right? Well, you know what happens. I've been curious ever since I was little, right? And part of that is because I just had a very curious life. I mean, trees would be very interesting to me, right? And I'd wander about our neighborhood and just look at everything, always, constantly. So what was I going to do? You can't say to a 12-year-old that's curious, don't go over there. Well, most people wouldn't, but for me, I did. The tide went out, I went on the other side of that little breakwater, that little jetty, and whoa, right? That was something. Because what happened there is, first, there are very few people. And frankly, just between you and me, between us, some of the people weren't wearing the same kind of bathing suits that were being worn in the more organized, orchestrated beach, you know what I'm saying? So, and at 12, that was startling, right? Way different, and kind of interesting, kind of intimidating. It was kind of different. But what happened for me is, in addition to that, something else. There was an incredible rock. It was really a rock of coral that when the tide goes out, it creates tide pools. You have a sense of that? And the wonder that occurs when you're noticing a tide pool, and then all the little creatures inside that pool, and the fish that are going, and the colors when the sun is shimmering in the coral. It was just remarkable, right? And I was sitting there maybe an hour, maybe more, I don't know. I was outside of time in that space. And then something way out of the ordinary happened, right? Behind me, I hear a voice. And the voice says, hey, did you know that rocks can talk? Whoa. Rocks can talk? You're kidding me. I heard that voice. I looked back, and there he was, 17 years old, kind of a surfer. And when you're 12 and you look back and there's a 17-year-old that's a surfer, it's like being visited by the gods, right? I mean, this was like a big deal. And he also said rocks could talk. I mean, I knew rocks could talk. I always imagined that, but nobody else ever shared that with me, right? I awakened. I thought, whoa, there are other people on this planet that imagine into things like I do. It was very, very curious that way. He then leaves, and I go back to sitting on the rock, of course, right? And now I am awake differently, because this is real. It's actual. The landscape is filled with possibility, and their voices. Whew, all right? Immediately you can see what's happening. So I'm in the child's mind, obviously, and I am in a realm of experience that's very, very different than what was happening at my school, Beachy Avenue Elementary School, for the record. That wasn't a lot of imagination there, no, not really. All right, so what happens next is I notice the tide, because now it's coming in. And I go, uh-oh, I'm in a bit of trouble here and now, right? And so I hurry, get up, and just fly over to the other side, right? And of course, my parents see me. Where have you been, right? What are you going to do with that? Where have you been? A, I didn't follow the rules. And B, I was in a place far, far away where rocks can talk and the gods make visit, right? What are you going to do with that? No, I was on the civilized side of the jetty. I was in the place where everything was orchestrated and organized, right? That stayed with me, you know, for a long, long time, that experience. And then I got curious. I got curious about what was happening in the night. Dreams were coming. I got interested in that. And I got interested in walking down the street and noticing other things. Houses had stories to tell, right? They do. Oh, now I'm thinking of this other story. I'll read some passages.
Okay.
But there's a woman in Santa Barbara, and I'm not going to use her name. You know her. Most of you would know her. Because when I said houses can talk, she's a real estate agent, and she's extremely successful, like one of the top 5 or 6. Other people that are in real estate always follow her. They want to know, how do you do it? How do you sell so many homes, right? She was with me in a number of workshops, and I heard her story. She said, you know, Steve, I can't really talk about it to many people, because if I do, particularly in my industry, they think I'm kind of, right? The word I would use would be nuts. And she said, here's what happens. Ever since I was little, I would walk down the neighborhood streets, and I would visit the houses on my way to school, on the way to her elementary school. And she would visit, and she would have conversations with the houses, literally, and she would hear them. Oh, and she said, I got so hurt when I saw a house that people left. I felt its grief. I mean, I know the people were maybe needed to leave, but the house itself seemed to be so sad. You know, she went on, because that was the child's mind at work. Years pass, decades pass, she goes to school, kind of forgets all of it, is what she shared with me, and then what happens is something different. She had a revelation because she got into real estate. And she said, you know, when I'm now in the business of selling houses and trying to find buyers for homes, right? And you know, Santa Barbara, that's a gig, right? That's a big deal. And she said, it breaks my heart when a person leaves a home, when a family that's been there for a long time leaves a house, and there's not the kind of grief, the rituals of grief and separation that would naturally happen, not only for the people, but for the house. She felt badly for the homes. So what she did, and her secret is that she listens to the stories of buyers that are potential buyers, and she listens to the stories of the houses, and then she matches the house with the buyer, listens to the story, working through imagination. Way successful. I mean, always at the top of anybody's list, right, of how many sales that she makes. Just extraordinary. She lives in the realms of imagination and utilizes that resource in her work. Imagination-centered life, which I talk about in this book again and again, is how to access imagination. So that we all are born with a blueprint, and the blueprint is informed by our imaginal inheritance, right? How to not only access that and the intelligence that's there, but then how to apply that into the world. This book is filled with stories, to which I shared with you, many stories, case examples, lots that surrounds the ideation of imagination and the useful and constructive value. From our physicality to our emotional and psychological life, how we apply the deep imagination for well-being, right? For well-being. So let me read a couple things, and then I want to invite questions or comments, and then we'll have a real dialogue, and I'll meet you and everybody here where we are, what we're interested in. Okay? All right. We'll do some very short, nice readings. And this one is on 122. It's now talking about imagination and how it's applied in the world. And I go into family life and into partnerships, relationships. I talk about this in the workplace. I talk about it in all kinds of ways and in different venues. How to work with imagination, actually, how it's an ally, how it's really a resource, an incredible resource to be applied to the different areas of our life. So this is from the Imagination-Centered Life. When you are living an imagination-centered life, you are anchored in your soul's journey. I can come back to that, so if anybody's interested, I'd love to talk about that. You are anchored in your soul's journey. The creativity and spontaneity that you were endowed with from the beginning re-emerges. As your relationship to the imagination matrix grows, a new clarity of purpose develops. The union between the everyday personhood and your inner life becomes more secure. You are grounded in the center place, the place of ease and well-being, the place of ease and well-being, the matrix of imagination. So I'm suggesting that there is a realm of consciousness, a web, right, that really contains the stories and the images and the figures that really generate an imagination-centered life. Okay? All right, any comments or questions? Now would be the great time to bring that into our conversation.
I have a sort of kind of a question, I guess.
Yeah.
As children are born, grow up dreaming, etc., right?
Yeah.
I assume they all do.
Yeah.
Do you recommend, because I believe also that there is such a thing as transgenerational dreaming trauma experience. And the question is, what is your statement of that? Is how do you encourage the parents to teach their children to dream and to encourage that curiosity, I guess?
Yeah, well, children dream, and they are an imaginal play, right? And often dreams are sometimes frightening, right? Nightmarish, sometimes really peculiar and curious. And as a parent, the first thing we often do is say, "Oh, honey," for good reason, right? Because we're frightened. If our child is frightened, we get frightened. "Oh, it's only a dream." So immediately it dismisses imagination and dream time, right? It's only a dream. The easy approach to keep it alive without really getting caught in too much concern and parental angst is to say, "Oh," and not playing Sigmund Freud. You're not trying to interpret or to tell the kid and do a psychoanalysis. That's the last thing they need to be psychologized, right? But it's very possible to just say, "Hey, we have a dream journal, and share your dream. Can you share it with me as a story? And let me write it down." Writing down the dream as a story just affirms the capacity for kids to be in imagination and in dream, right? It's really wonderful. Then, what a wonderful blessing it is for a parent to share something of their story. Now we're talking story to story in imagination, and something awakens and sustained, right? And the curious thing is, who's learning more? The parent or the child, right? Yeah, right?
You can't argue that one.
Yeah, you can't argue that one. The parent is brought back into an imaginal life, right?
Absolutely.
It's, we all know, when we're telling stories to our kids, and the little ones in particular, and they're sharing back, oh my gosh, how fulfilling is that, right? Yeah, it just feeds the imagination, and the imagination is the place of soul making. So we get reconnected. And something else happens too, I want to share, and then I want to take another question. The other thing that happens is we get to know the characters in the story, okay? Now I call them in this book soul companions. So I do a lot with that in this particular text. Soul companions these are the figures that are inner, right? So we know we want an outer community that is incredibly supportive and important, particularly in the world of today, right? To be part of an outer community. It's also extraordinary to develop relationship with the figures of our inner community, our soul community, our soul companions. My gosh, because I do what I do and I've been a therapist for like decades, I'm not really interested in platitudes and kind of idealism and all like that. Just in actual way of being in life, when I'm connected with soul companions, I feel a sense of belonging, you know? I'm not alone. I have connectivity with the figures that are moving through me. The stories that they tell are very incredible, interesting, and that's where our inspiration comes from. Our innate genius, as I talk about in the book, evolves from that place. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful experience to cultivate, literally cultivate relationships with the figures of imagination. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, another question or comment? Yes.
We're late.
Well, that's greetings, and we're glad you're here.
Hi.
Hey.
Do you have a question or a comment?
Christina, I think in the bright, yeah, she does. Right
Okay, please. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't remember my childhood, and I'm not quite sure if it's relevant, but I feel like the dreaming has started with it. How
Yeah.
do I motivate the dreaming?
Mhm. The question is, how do I open dreaming back up, right?
Thank you.
So here are 3 easy ideas. We're always dreaming. That's the first thing. Always dreaming, right? 3, 4 times a night. We can measure that now. We have all the equipment to notice when REM sleep comes. That's the dream state. And if we wake people up, you know, so that they don't go into that state, it's just 2 days later that you go nuts. So it's required. It's one of the important parts of being alive and being human, actually. There's all kinds of ways of dreaming, though, right? Sometimes it's images and stories that we see. That's the traditional way. Sometimes we wake up in a mood, in a feeling state, right? And that's a dream that's moving through, but not accompanied by images,
Okay.
right? And then other times it's a gesture. The body is tight. We wake up, you know, the same. We wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Oh, and there's nothing that we can really discover that's out in our world that is creating that. The dreaming psyche is offering itself to us. So one thing to do, right, is just notice in the morning, you know, before going to sleep, tonight I'm going to remember my dreams 3 times. In the morning, before everything rushes in, like all the information of the day, the to-do list, right, before checking messages on the cell phone, that's the big thing now. What percentage of people do you think reach for their cell phone before doing anything else in the day? Before doing anything else in the day, reach for the cell phone to check messages, right? If you said 50%, no. 70%, no. 80-something percent, yes. When I lecture in China, which I'm just about to go back to, please be safe, it is like 90s, in the 90s%. Checking cell phone, checking messages. Yeah, we're forever yearning to know something that's right. Okay, but once that happens, all the dream work goes away, the dreams. If I don't, in the morning, first thing, jot down impressions or just little hints, I'll forget it within 10 minutes, right? 5 minutes sometimes, right? So, dream journal by the bed, just doing that, just being here is really an incredible inspiration. It invites an interest and a curiosity in dreams. Remember, the dreaming psyche is like a really good friend, right? Sometimes harsh, sometimes difficult, truly, right? And other times extraordinary. I mean, always extraordinary, but sometimes something new happens. Sometimes it's a repeat of experiences that are from early on. We get triggered by something in the daytime. The dream picks that up and expresses a representation of that. So, here are the 3 deals again, 3 ideas. 1, journal, interest like we're here now. In the morning, at night, 3 times I can remember my dreams. It's called liminal space, where we're between awake and sleep. In that place, taking the moments and writing whatever impressions come by, right? And if that all doesn't quite work, right, then you go back to the last dream that you do remember. 3 years ago?
Oh, yes.
5 years ago? 10 years ago?
Yes.
30 years ago? Doesn't matter, right? And work with the dream, and there's hints in this book and hints in my first book, yes, of what to do with the dream once it comes forward, right? I'll share this. When we work with dream tending, right, when we tend to a dream, we're working with the idea in traditional dream work is, hey, what does this dream mean, right? What does this have to do with me, you know? Or what is it, what messages is it bringing? Those kinds of things. In tending to a dream, and then more fully, when we're working in the matrix of imagination, the questions change. Who's visiting now? Notice that difference, right? Who's visiting now? What's happening here? Very different, evokes curiosity. We're naturalists then of the psyche. We're not observers or interpreters or using the rational mind to so quickly make meaning going into an explanatory system. Who's visiting now? Who's here now? What's happening here? Getting the bigger picture. Right? And then this last one, which is extraordinary and really speaks to this new work in the book. What is the dream's desire? What is the dream's desire? What is the pull of the future, right? We always imagine dreams as having a lot to say about the present, which they do, and or the past, which they inform, but also are becoming, you know, the future, the hints of what's being asked. I've hardly ever worked with a dream that does not have encoded hints of the pull of the future, are becoming. And when we work in the imagination, deep imagination, which this book goes into, the dream becomes a portal, frankly, a portal through which to begin the journey and meet soul companions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does that help you?
Yes.
Good.
Very much.
Cool.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
write this down, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I have a question. I'm not quite sure I'm articulating this right, but
Uh-huh.
I've been involved in dream groups in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah.
And the model was basically, you share a dream and friends say, if that were mine, blah, blah, blah would be happening. And you kind of check in and you can either go, oh my God, that's right, and it opens up the whole world of possibilities, or you go, nah, that's not really it.
Yeah.
Because nobody can tell you what your dream means.
Right.
And what I was gonna ask before you started talking
Yeah.
was, what is that that's happening? And are we expanding our imagination or contracting it when we interact with other people and their ideas? When you said that about dream tending and who's in, you know, what's inhabiting the dream,
Mhm.
it makes me wonder, is that old model of dream groups where we reflect back to other people what their images brought up in us? Is
Yeah.
that obsolete? Are we heading the wrong direction?
Well, it's not obsolete. Actually, one of our good friends, Jeremy Taylor, brought that forward 40 years ago or so.
It was,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've worked with Jeremy too.
You worked with Jeremy, so that was, you know, that was way. It's wonderful that way because you're not imposing. That was his work, trying not to impose
Right.
our interpretation on another person. If that was my dream, then you're speaking from the inside out, right?
Right.
Now we can open that even more fully. Mhm. We can host the dream and listen to what's coming forward and get curious and asking open-ended questions rather than giving information, analysis, or interpretation. Open-ended questions. How? Can you say more about that? Right? And it allows the dream to come to life. The beauty of a dream group, when it's done that way, when it's open and expansive and invitational, it invites the imagination into the room. The other direction is interpretive, and we're right back into our rational thinking, right? When the imagination is present, there's a field of experience that opens, right? A quality of consciousness and attunement that dreams love. I mean, so dreams love to be welcomed into the conversation. Now think about that in a family or in a couple relationship. To be able to be present and listen to another person's dream, or a family sharing dreams with one another. The importance is safety, right? You know, to be protected and safe, because sometimes people will take advantage and start judging or giving their critique or their impositional interpretation. So pulling off of that, and the key word is hosting, to host a dream, rather than to analyze or interpret the dream. Yeah, and the same thing is true with the imagination, right? I talk a whole bunch about what it is to befriend imagination. right? To open imagination, to access imagination, to allow imagination to come forward and inform who we are and how we are. Dreams provide portals. Now, the work that I do with dreams is just a very beginning place. Important, but every dream offers portals into the realms of imagination. And I talk about what it's like to journey in those realms, right? Which we all know. I mean, what's happening now are all kinds of mediums that promote journeying, right? From ingesting different substances to doing A, B, C, and D. And all have merit in one way or the next. And two, there's another possibility to journey in the realms of imagination, discover what is truly going on behind the scenes in our life. And you know, what's going on behind the scenes influences our way of being, our emotional well-being, our psychological, and our physical well-being. So getting to know the players, the people that are telling, the figures that are telling these stories, so incredibly helpful. Okay. Should we sign books now? Anybody would like? I'm very happy to sign a book. You need to buy a book first. Then I got my orders, and then I'll sit here and offer an inscription, and I'm going to ask your name, even if I know you, and ask for the spelling of your name, and then write something for you. Okay?
Lori has one question before we close.
Oh, a good question. I
Kind of
love
a
questions. You
big
know that.
question,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna give it in the way of a dream.
Okay.
I woke up in 2015
Yeah.
with no images, but this statement.
Ah.
When you see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse coming, turn your eyes inward and start a new civilization in your belly. I'll repeat it, because I repeated it when I woke up with it.
Mhm.
When you see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse coming, turn your eyes inward and start a new civilization in your belly. So when I think about the big events in our world,
Mhm.
I think about the comment that it's a failure of imagination.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to ask this question, but I guess the question is how to find a way to support the dream world to dream a new world.
Yeah.
And how to have community
Mhm.
that is dreaming the collective world forward.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think for me that's the heart of the matter, right? And the soul of the matter, actually. And I think to begin with, to be in small communities, because when we're in small communities and we're listening to one another and listening to the images come through, we are on a different frequency. We are sending and receiving as that portal opens, because now we're in the matrix of imagination, right? We are truly in the field, the tapestry, the web of imagination. And there we are listening to one another, and the imagery in the dream speaks both personally, doesn't it? And as you're noticing, profoundly and elementally to the psyche of the world soul. And I think now, at this moment in time, more than most times, it's so important because it's so easy to get caught in the conformity of what's happening, right? Everybody's going to be taking political positions, right? We're going to get caught in our sense of what should happen here and what should happen there. We're going to condemn some people. We're going to encourage other people. I mean, that's part of what it is to be in a collective human experience. To stay anchored in the dream time keeps us anchored in our particular innate intelligence and our contribution. And when we have a gathering of 4, 5, 10, 12, 15, 20, and we're all doing that collectively, we're sending and we're contributing. And then we get to know our particular role in it. I mean, what is my role? What is being asked of me now in relation to what's going on in the world? I mean, truly, I know, I get it. I read all the newspapers. I get social media. I'm hearing what's going on in college campuses and in corporations. I get what is being asked of me to do, right? But what actually, individually, personally, authentically is being asked as a response? And I think that lives in imagination. Yeah. Yeah, well,
Dr.
thank you.
Stephen, thank you for sharing the imagination
Yes.
matrix with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.